Hey class, this is Tom Roberts here. I wanted to do my TED Talk and talk about a personal experience of mine. I'm titling this one Bringing Back an Ancient Practice. So here we go. Years ago, let's say the last half of 2005 to be exact, I found myself at a crossroad. I was laid off from the airline that I was working for. I was struggling to be a good husband and a father, because as men, our whole identity orbits around what we do for a living. If I was no longer an aircraft mechanic, then who was I? I was lost at sea with no sense of bearing, no clue as to where my life was heading. In January of 2006, by the grace of God, I was recalled back to the airline. Though I returned to work, I was not returned to my old position. The position I returned to was in line maintenance. Prior to that, I worked in an engine shop. So, line mechanics, they often work together in pairs for safety reasons. So when I went back to work, I was paired with an older guy. His name was John. John, I only really knew him in name only. Our interactions prior to the layoff was non-existent. So John, old-time Vietnam veteran. He lived and worked in Indianapolis, but his family stayed behind in Dayton, Ohio. He lived alone, and many of the other line mechanics, they just kind of dismissed John as a hermit, sort of a lone wolf. So working with John, we would get to know each other on a personal level. He was always chipper and in a good mood. He had one of the most positive attitudes that I have ever met, out of anyone I've ever met. I asked John how he managed to stay so chipper all the time. And he indicated me that he has purpose outside of work. He told me that he belonged to a lodge of Freemasons. Immediately, my curiosity was piqued. I started doing my own research into Freemasonry, and what I found was a brotherhood steeped in rich, ancient history. So the structure of a lodge is based on the old stonemasons that built the great temple for King Solomon in Jerusalem. The craft of stonemasonry at that time was a highly regarded skill. Just look at some of the ancient buildings constructed during that age. The stonemasons were organized into guilds, and they protected their craft, even with their own lives. So not everyone could be trusted to do that kind of work. The craft often passed from father to son, and so on for generations. So basically, when a boy was old enough to learn the craft from his father, he was vetted, and if found worthy, he was accepted into the guild. He became an apprentice. He would be paired with a master stonemason so he could learn the skills necessary to become a mason in his own right. After years of study and hard work, again, After years of study and hard work, he'd face the council of elders again and in the guild, and if he was found worthy, he would advance to the position of a fellow. A fellowship meant that he was trusted and skilled enough to work on his own. A fellow would spend years owning his abilities until one day he faced the council again, where he would hopefully be raised to the rank of a master mason. A master mason took on the role of overseeing the craft. He would train apprentices and recruit new men into the guild. Amongst the ranks of the master masons, there were wardens to ensure that each man was treated and compensated fairly. The wardens were stationed along each wall of the temple, one in the north, south, and west, but the warden in the east was the senior warden, and he was the leader of the guild. So why am I bringing up this ancient practice? How does this relate to today's social and ethical responsibilities of today's management? I'll tell you. After being intrigued by John, I asked if I too could become a Freemason. I went through all the steps and was raised to the rank of Master Mason. During my education of Freemasonry, things took a darker turn at the airline, and I was furloughed once again. This time, instead of being put on the street, I made a decision to bump to Chicago Midway Station. I'd be damned if I'd find myself out of work again. My family and I all agreed that I would go to Chicago for work, for the work week, and commute back home on my days off. This lasted about 3 months before the airline announced further cuts to its maintenance staff. And this time my options were Dallas or out on the street. As luck would have it, my former engine shop manager took a director of maintenance job for a repair station in Rome, New York. When he heard of further cuts at the airline, he reached out to me to offer both me and my wife positions within his organization. After much deliberation, we came to the decision as a family to move to New York State. So here we are, strangers in a strange land, Midwesterners living and working on the East Coast. Needless to say, the locals were not very welcoming. My boss hired me to lead the interior shop. My specialty was in jet engines, so why would he put me in charge of the interior shop? He put me in charge because there was a leadership vacuum that existed in that department. In the days after starting my new role, I studied my crew. I observed who was skilled and who wasn't. I learned their methods and their practices. I took steps to try to get them to warm up to me. I took the things that I learned about the old stonemasons and their guilds and applied it to my job. I had become the warden in the East for these people. I paired the least experienced with the most experienced. I ensured that everyone was treated fairly with dignity and respect. I made sure everyone was compensated and cared for. It took some time, but these people warmed up to me. It wasn't long before the interiors crew became the envy of the rest of the organization. So the point of my TED Talk is that people are more than just resources. They are more than just labor. They are, in fact, people who just wanted to be treated fair. And when they found out that they were being treated fair, they produced far beyond what they thought they were capable of. What I got out of it was knowing that I made a difference in these people's lives. They were happy to show up to work and give 100% each day. I went to bat for them, and in return, they went to bat for me. So my tenure up in New York, it did not last long. My wife was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, and we made a decision as a family to return to Indiana to be close to family. I longed for those days when I felt like I was making a difference. That's why I am here today, earning my degree in technical management, so that one day I can return to leadership position within a company so I can reapply those principles I learned from those ancient stonemasons. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.